Good morning, everyone. I am Shaira Sarongan, and I will be reporting historical foundations of the Philippine curriculum. For the objectives of the lesson, first, identify the events, curriculum, and purpose of education in each phase. Second, assess how education is established by colonizers. Third, analyze the concepts and principles of Philippine education. Fourth, establish connections towards educational goals from the past to the present. For the timeline of the Philippine curriculum, let us start before 1521, which is pre-Spanish era. Next is 1521 to 1896, which is Spanish era. 1896 to 1899 is the Philippine Revolution. 1898 to 1935 is the American occupation. 1935 to 1941 is the Philippine Commonwealth. 1941 to 1944 is the Japanese occupation. And 1945 to present is EDSA and post-EDSA. Before the Philippines attained complete independence in 1946, the country's education system was patterned on the systems of Spain and the United States. So countries which colonized and governed the country for more than 300 years. However, after independence, the country's educational system has constantly undergone reform. Pre-Spanish era. So Filipinos possessed a culture of their own. So they had contacts with foreign people from like India, Arabia, China, and Borneo. The inhabitants were civilized people possessing their system of writing, laws, and moral standards in a well-organized system of government. So education was informal and unstructured during the Spanish era. Children were provided vocational training but less academics by their parents and in the houses of their tribal tutors. So they used a unique system of writing called the baybayin. And also during this time, they are guided by the code of Kalansiaw and Managtas, in which you shall not kill, neither you steal, neither shall you do harm to the aged, lest you incur the danger of death. All those who infringe this order shall be condemned to death by being drowned in the river or in boiling water. So during the pre-colonial period, most of the children were provided solely vocational training, which was supervised by their parents, or tribal tutors, or those assigned for specific specialized roles within their communities, like for example, the babaylan. In most communities, stories, songs, poetry, dances, medicinal practices, and advice regarding all sorts of community life issues were passed from one generation to generation, mostly through oral tradition. So some communities utilized a writing system known as baybayin, whose use was wide and varied, though there are other syllabaries used throughout the archipelago. So this is the baybayin. So the curriculum, Alibata, is an ancient system of writing that was used before. So education was informal, unstructured, and devoid of methods. The focus was on the training and less academics, or the 3 R's, which are reading, writing, and religion. Informal education was conducted through observations, example, imitation. So there was no direct teaching method during pre-Spanish era. The aims of education for the pre-Spanish era are survival, conformity, inculturation, or acculturation. The methods during this era are show and tell, observation, trial and error, and imitation. The types are informal, practical, and theoretical. Let's proceed with the Spanish era. So Spain initiated reforms by passing laws on education during this time. The Philippine Revolution against Spain led to the discovery of Katipunan in 1896, so which resulted the surrender of the last Spanish Governor General Diego de los Rios to the Ilonggo revolutionaries headed by General Martin Delgado on December 25, 1898 in Plaza Alfonso. So, establishment of a normal school from male teachers under the supervision of the Jesuits. The Spanish school started accepting Filipino students during this time. It was during this time also that the intellectual Filipinos emerged. According to the Education Decree of 1866, the access to education by Filipinos was later liberalized through the enactment of this decree. So, provided for the establishment of at least one primary school for the boys and girls in each town under the responsibility of the municipal government. The curriculum for the Spanish era was formal, organized, religion-oriented education. The Spanish missionaries were the tutors during this time, the Christian doctrine, prayers, and sacred songs. So 3 hours were only given to the brighter pupils or brighter students. The Spanish school started accepting Filipino students. So it was during this time wherein the schools were parochial or convent schools. Also, the main reading materials were the Cartilla, Catecismo. The schools were also upgraded and the curriculum organization were separately subject organization. So during Spanish era, there were 3 grade levels, which are the entrada, ascenso, and termino. The aim of education during Spanish era was to promote first Christianity, and then promotion of Spanish also, Spanish language, and imposition of Spanish. The methods used were dictation, promotion of Spanish, cenaculo, and theater. The types of education during this time was formal, religious, catechist, and vocational course. So the educational system was also Christian doctrine, values, and history. So the educational system teaches catechism to natives. Spanish language was also compulsory. So there were an adequate education, and also some Filipino students were suppressed, limited, and controlled. So during this time, that education is a privilege and not a right. So also, since it is a privilege, most of the time education was only for the elite. It was also during this time wherein mathematics, agriculture, etiquette, singing, world geography, and Spanish history were taught. So we will now proceed to the First Republic era. The First Republic era, or it is also known as the Malolos Republic. So it is a short-lived revolutionary government in the Philippines where it is written by Felipe Calderon and Buen Camino as an alternative to a pair of proposals to the Malolos Congress by Apolinario Mabini and Pedro Paterno. It was formally established with the proclamation of the Malolos Constitution on January 23, 1899, which is in Malolos, Bulacan. So the highlight for the First Republic era were curricular reforms, secularization of education, attention to natural science, improvement of higher centers of learning, lack of pedagogical skills, irrelevant courses in curriculum. So the curriculum during this time was wherein the subjects taught during this time were science, math, history, philosophy, law, language, PE, religion, music, social sciences. So on the First Republic, the schools maintained by the Spain for more than 3 centuries were closed for a short period but were reopened on August 29, 1898 by the Secretary of Interior. The Burgos Institute in Malolos, which is the Military Academy of Malolos, and the Literary University of the Philippines were established. So according to the Article 23 of the Malolos Constitution, mandated that public education would be free and obligatory in all schools of the nation under the First Philippine Republic. So unlike the Spanish era wherein it is a privilege and it is not a right. So for the First Republic era, it is mandated that the education was free and obligatory. During the American era, education was used by the Americans as one of the most effective means of pacifying the restless natives. So schools were established all over the archipelago of the Philippines. So the natives were taught how to read and write. They also learned American geography, history, lives of American heroes, and sang Star Spangled Banner and learned the English language. So education was used by the government or the Americans. During this time, there is a higher literacy rate among people contributed to the improvement of their standard of living. So improvement in public health and employment opportunities. Also, education was for social mobility and democratic ideals. It was based on the ideals of and tradition of American values. So during American era, English was a medium of instruction. It is the main medium of instruction. The primary curriculum prescribed during American era in 1904 by the Americans for the Filipinos consisted of 3 grades into 2 aspects. So first is the body training, which is, for example, we have the singing, we have the drawing, we have the physical education. And for the mental training, which is the reading, the writing, the phonetics, the spelling, the nature study, and the arithmetic. The curriculum for American era was intermediate curriculum includes arithmetic, geography, science, and English, science, plant life, physiology, and sanitation. Collegiate level includes normal schools, which aims to replace soldiers and Thomasites. So, American era, wherein group teaching method was also adopted. There was a prohibition of compulsory religious instruction in public schools. During this time, vocational education and household activities, like for example, sewing, cooking, and farming, were also integrated in the curriculum. There was also an existence of adult education to give formal education. So during American era, there was a spread of democracy and formation of good citizen, including rights and responsibilities. So during the American era, the teachers were called Thomasites, wherein in August 1901, 600 teachers called Thomasites came to the Philippines, which were named after SS Thomas. So Filipino soldiers stopped teaching when a group of teachers, which were called the Thomasites, from the US came to the Philippines in June 1901. So there were some schools created during American era, which was first the Philippine Normal School in 1901, National University 1901 also, University of the Philippines 1908, University of Manila 1914, Philippine Women's University 1919, and Far Eastern University in 1933. There were also some scholars which who are Judge Jose Abad Santos, Francisco Benetes, Honoraris Sison, and also Francisco Delgado. The aim of education during American era was to teach democracy. So also the separation of the church and the state. The methods used during this time was socialized recitation, participation, and debate. And the types of education were formal education, first public school, English language democracy. The role of the teacher during American era were to teach concepts and develop the rational mind. Like for example, they have debate. So after the American era, we have the Commonwealth era, in which this era was interrupted when the Japanese occupied the Philippines in January 2, 1942. The Commonwealth government was led by Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio Esmeña, who went into exile in the US. So Japanese forces installed a puppet government led by Jose P. Laurel. So this is known as the Second Philippine Republic. So on October 20, 1944, the Allied forces led by General Douglas MacArthur landed on the island of Leyte to liberate the Philippines from Japan and finally surrendered on September 2, 1945. The curriculum during Commonwealth era was for the training of elementary school teachers was expanded by the Bureau of Education by elevating it from secondary schools to the collegiate level, so organizing 8 regional normal schools. The educational practices during Commonwealth era where Filipino language was used as a medium of instruction. Vocational schools were made more similar in curriculum to academic schools. Third, the celebration of National Language Week, which is in every August. The values taught were moral character, personal discipline, civic conscience, and vocational efficiency. And lastly, they have the citizenship training. The aim of education during Commonwealth era was to develop moral character, civic conscience, vocational efficiency, preparation for incoming independence. The methods used were memorization, CAT, and recitation. And the medium of instruction used during this era was Filipino. So, according to the Constitution, which is 1935 Constitution, Article 14, Section 5, all schools shall aim to develop moral character, personal discipline, civic conscience, vocational efficiency, and also teach duties of citizenship. So during this time, the role of teachers was to promote nationalism, values, moral character, and personal discipline. So after the Commonwealth era, we have the Japanese era. So on June 1942, there was a military order that mandated the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and character education to Filipino students with emphasis on love for work and dignity of labor. So during this time, there were reopening of elementary schools, vocational, and normal schools. Institutions offered courses during Japanese era were agriculture, medicine, fisheries, and engineering. Japanese language is popularized to terminate the use of the English. So instead of using English, they promoted the use of Japanese language, which is Nihongo. So Filipino children went to school to learn Japanese songs and games. So there were a strict there was a strict censorship of textbooks and other learning materials. So which means they destroyed the public school system by manipulating it for their advantage. So there were a limited sources of books, textbooks, and other learning materials during the Japanese era. So school buildings, books, and other educational materials were destroyed. So in short, there was a breakdown of social values that yet there were some Filipinos who are willing to learn education. The 6 basic principles of Japanese education were realization of new order and promote friendly relations between Japan and the Philippines. Second is foster a Filipino culture based. Third is the fusion of the Japanese language in the Philippines. Promotion of vocational course. And last, inspire people with the spirit to love neighbor. So the curriculum, they introduced many changes in the curriculum by including Nihongo and abolishing English as a medium of instruction and as a subject as well. So the Japanese devised curriculum caused a blackout in the Philippine education and impeded the education progress. So since the most books and schools were destroyed, so it impeded the education progress in the Philippines. The aim of education during Japanese era were to eradicate the old idea of reliance on Western nation. So also the love of labor and military training. Methods used during this era were stressed on the dignity of manual labor, emphasis of vocational education, and also debate. So the types of education during this era is vocational training. So the language used mostly is the Japanese language or the Nihongo. The next era is the Third Republic era. So the transition of government ended in 1945, which is the same year World War II ended. In July 4, 1946, the Third Philippine Republic inaugurated in Luneta. So there were guests like General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of the Allied power in Japan, former Governor General F.B. Harrison, the most beloved American Governor General in the Philippines. So during this time, the solemn moment of independence ceremony with the raising of the Philippine flag by President Rojas and lowering of American flag by Ambassador MacNat. So um there during the Third Republic era, there was a massive rebuilding not only of the infrastructure but more so of the values of the Filipinos that was wrecked by the during the war. So there was a massive rehabilitation of the schools, school buildings, and the restoration through the school system of the values that were practiced during the pre-war society. So there were education program during the Third Republic, which is the concept of academic freedom, only universities established by the states, religious instruction in the public school, the creation of scholarships in the arts, sciences, and letter was for specially gifted citizens, and for those who possess a certain level of capability for academic studies and are unable to afford the cost of college education. So during this time, according to President Diosdado Macapagal, on his second State of the Nation address, he expressed that the basic to the efforts towards economic expansion and the growth of social benefits to the common man is the proper education of its citizenry. So it is on this objective that the Department of Education formulated policies and implemented measures to improve the quality instruction and to strengthen the curricula in all levels of instruction. It was also during the Third Republic era wherein the educational practices were more on the moral character, the quality of a person that guides his thinking, behavior, and relationship with other social concern and involvement. And also, the educational practice involved vocational efficiency, productivity, complete and adequate system of republic education, and also the changes with the changing time and human beings. So after the Third Republic era, the New Society era enters. So there was a Presidential Decree 6A wherein it is entitled Educational Development Decree of 1972, in which the Department of Education became the Department of Education and Culture, the Ministry of Education and Culture with Education Act of. After the Third Republic era, New Society era enters. So the Presidential Decree 6A, entitled Educational Development Decree of 1972, which states to provide for a broad and general education, attain potential as human being, enhance the range and quality of individual, acquire the essential educational foundation, train the nation's manpower in the middle level, skills, so develop the high-level professions for leadership of the nation, respond effectively to changing needs. So um, there were highlights of during this era, which are the Department of Education became the Department of Education and Culture in 1972. Then the Ministry of Education and Culture in 1978 with Education Act 1982. Then after it, the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports. So also, the bilingual education was established in 1974, in which requiring Filipino and English. Science and math subject as well as English language and literature classes were taught in English while the rest were taught in Filipino. The aim of education during New Society era was to teach democracy, separation of church and state, Socialization, the method during this era was socialized recitation, participation, and debate. Also, the types of education were formal education, first public school, English language, democracy. So, after the new society era, we're in the post-EDSA era. So, during this time, it was the full implementation of basic education curriculum, or the BEC. The BEC, or the basic education curriculum, is a form of tool which will stand as one point of learning area as adequate for the development of competencies starting from the basic education up to the second level, which is renowned as high school. So there are some features of the BEC, which are the greater emphasis on helping every learner become a successful reader, emphasis on interactive, collaborative learning approaches, emphasis on the use of integrative learning approaches, teaching of values in all learning areas, development of self-reliant and patriotic citizens, and development of creative and critical thinking skills. So it was during Gloria Arroyo's administration, wherein the revised BEC has been implemented since June 2002 and focuses on the 5 learning areas, which are the English, the science, math, Filipino, and Makabayan. So these 5 learning areas form the previous 8 per grade or year level. So after the BEC, we have now, which is the present, the K to 12 curriculum, in which RA 10533, known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, was signed into law by President Aquino on May 15, 2013. With the passage of this law, the K-12 basic education program was formalized. So, Benigno Aquino III's administration, in which Armin Luistro as the Secretary of Education, the implementation of there was an implementation of the K-12. So the K-12 curriculum adheres to the principle of the mother tongue based multilingual education, the use of the spiral progression approach to ensure the masteral of knowledge and skills in every level. Also, the K-12 is flexible enough to enable and allow schools to localize, indigenize, and enhance the same based on their respective educational and social contexts. So, the K-12 covers the basic education, in which 6 years of primary education, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school. The additional grade level for K-12 is the kindergarten and the 2 years for the senior high school. The K-12 curriculum is a learner-centered and exclusive and developmentally appropriate for the learners. So K-12 is also relevant, responsive, and research-based. You can contextualize and global use of pedagogical approaches that are constructivist, inquiry-based, and reflective, collaborative, and integrative. So, as you can see, there is a RA 10157, or the Kindergarten Act, Kindergarten Education Act. So what is the purpose of this act? So This act makes kindergarten as the first stage of compulsory and mandatory formal education, in which DepEd views the institutionalization of kindergarten as a key move in implementing the administration's flagship K to 12. Hence the name K to 12 or Kinder to 12 curriculum. So the rationale is that there is an urgent need to enhance the quality of basic education in our country as seen in the education outcomes of Filipino students. So this is the structure of K to 12. Kindergarten, which is 5 years old. So we have grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is for grade 1 they have 6 years old, and for the grade 6, which is 11 years old. So that is 6 years of elementary. After elementary, they will proceed to 4 years of junior high school, which is grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, and grade 10. Or the new high school year 1, new high school year 2, new high school year 3, and new high school year 4. Because previously on the BEC, we call the grade 7 as first year high school, the grade 8 as second year high school, the grade 9 as third year, and the grade 10 as fourth year high school. And also the additional of 2 years of senior high school, which are the grade 11 and grade 12, which is for the grade 11, the new high school year 5, and for the grade 12, the new high school year 6. So all schools must adhere to the following standards, which are these three: the age requirement, the duration, and the curriculum. So the K to 12 program covers the kindergarten and 12 years of basic education. So 6 years of primary education, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school, to provide sufficient time for mastery of concepts and skills. So develop lifelong learners and prepare graduates for tertiary education and mid-level skills and development. So these are the salient features of the K to 12. Okay, so first is strengthening early childhood education, which is universal kindergarten, making the curriculum relevant to learners, contextualization and enhancement, um, ensuring integrated and seamless learning through spiral progression, building proficiency through language, which is mother tongue-based multilingual education, gearing up for the future, senior high school, and nurturing the holistically developed Filipino, which is college and livelihood readiness and the 21st century skills. For the K-12, the 7 learning areas where are languages, literature, communication, mathematics, philosophy, natural sciences, and social sciences. So there are some pros and cons. So the pros for the K to 12, so we are at par with international, which is the 12 years basic education. Since the Philippines is the last country in Southeast Asia to implement the K to 12. So now we are at par with them. So pursue productive employment, entrepreneurship, and higher education studies. Graduates are expected to be equipped with the 21st century skills. So if we have pros, then we also have cons, which is another sets a burden for average Filipino family because of the additional 2 years. Then they will also have additional 2 years of providing allowances and also paying for the tuition of their children. So there are tracks and strands for the K to for the senior high school. So choosing this in choosing tracks, we have four tracks for senior high school: the academic track, the sports track, the technical vocational livelihood, and the arts and design. Under the academic track, we have the STEM, the UMS, the GAS, and the ABM. So choosing the academic track, choosing this track means you are looking forward to go to college. So this track will help you prepare yourself for the subject specialization of the college course you will take in the future. So you have four, as you can see, you have four strands, which are the STEM, the UMS, the GAS, and the ABM to choose from. For the sports track aims to give an understanding of the basic principles and techniques in relation to physical education and recreation. It will also offer the students to discuss various factors that affect their social, psychological, and cognitive development in sport, leadership, and management. So the related professions in this track, which is the sports track, are fitness trainers, game officials, tournament manager, recreation attendant, masseur, or gym instructor. For the technical vocational livelihood, so if the students are not sure if they will be able to pursue any degree after senior high school, they or if they want to earn money immediately after graduation, then this track is for them, which is the technical vocational livelihood. So even without college, this track will equip the students with job-ready skills in the future. So since this track also invests primarily on the skills that can gain the students requisites such as COCs or the certificate of competency, and the NCs, which are offered by the TESDA or the national certifications, which would be essential when looking for better career opportunities in agriculture, electronics, and trade. So this is also important when applying abroad, where the skills you gain would prepare you as you join the workforce. So usually they give the highest NC that they give is the NC2 for the students. And lastly, the arts and design. So this track will prepare the students as they wander around the design, performative, and creative industry. What does this track aims to get the student a career in the creative field after they graduate? So breaking the stereotype that is there is no career in this industry or in this track, which is the arts and design, the students will be surprised at how fun the arts and designs world can be. So to instill the right employment skills so that the students can get job immediately after graduation is part of the curriculum of this track, is to expose the students to various form of media such as like the architecture, the interior design, the industrial design, the graphic design, animation, painting, fashion design, photography, and film. So there are a lot of what do you call this media in which the arts and design track can offer. So for the academic, which are the four um um, strands that they can choose if they decide to proceed with academic track. So the general academic strand is great for the students who are still undecided on which track they're going to take or which strand they are going to take. So the students can choose electives from different academic strands under this track. So these subjects include humanities, social sciences, applied economics, organization and management, and disaster preparedness. For the UMS, this strand is designed for those who wonder what is on the other side of the wall. So in other words, the students are ready to take on the world and talk to a lot of people. This is for those who are considering in taking up, like for example, journalism, communication arts, liberal arts, education, and other social science related courses in college. So if they take this strand, they could be looking forward to becoming a teacher, a psychologist, or a lawyer even, a writer, a social worker, or a reporter someday. So if fumes are gas is not for you, then you may take the STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So which are intertwining disciplines when applied in the real world. So the difference of STEM curriculum with other strands and track is the focus on advanced concept and topics. So under the track or under the STEM track, you can become a pilot, an architect, an astrophysicist, a biologist, a chemist, an engineer, a dentist, a nutritionist, a nurse, a doctor, and there are a lot more that is related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And lastly, which is the ABM, or stands for accountancy, business, and management. So this strand would focus on the basic concepts of financial management, business management, corporate operations, and all things that are accounted for. So ABM can also lead to careers of the students on management and accounting, which could be sales, like for example, sales manager, human resources, marketing director, project officer, bookkeeper, accounting clerk, internal auditor, and a lot more. And that would be the end of my report. Thank you very much for listening.